Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danielle, here with Ken.
Hey guys, what's happening?
So this weekend I went to a really fun barbecue.
Yep, that was fun. It's nice.
Yeah,
Be
our friend
outside a little bit.
Danny and Jody, always nice having us over.
They're always having parties.
They totally are. But anyways, let's just hop into it. So today we're going to talk about how to be successful, how to set yourself up for success when you're younger, right? So we're kind of going to walk through, your life story and how you got to where you are now, because we have a lot of 20s, 30s, 40-some-year-old people watching that, want to get ahead and kind of own some real estate, and it would be interesting to hear how you did it.
Sure. I'm happy to go through whatever you want.
All right. So we're going to start from 18-year-old graduating from high school, Ken. Kenny back then, right? Kenny.
Yeah. Well, I will be honest. I was not focused. I did not know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be. I was not driven like a lot of kids are.
Okay, but you were driven in a way because you were a wrestler, knowing that you needed to be good at wrestling to get a full ride to college because you did not grow up with money.
That's true. Yeah. So what I meant by that is I don't think that I didn't value education. I wasn't taught to. My parents didn't teach that to me. We weren't readers. We were basically like, come home when it's dark.
Well, your mom was a hairdresser and your dad was a handyman.
Yeah.
So they kind of just worked with their hands and scrappy. And
fine. Honestly, it was a great childhood. I have no regrets. But the point is that I didn't. My brother went to college, and that was like, wow.
Yeah, your older brother. Yep.
Yeah, my older brother, and my sister did not. And I was there. They didn't know what I was going to end up with.
Right. And it wasn't an issue either way for them, probably.
No, and the high school that I went to, not very many kids went to college. It just wasn't a thing. And so a lot of us went into trades and things like that. And so most of my friends, I would say, well, in high school, 60-70% did not go to college.
Right,
Easy.
right. But so you were a wrestler.
I was, yeah.
And you were pretty good, and that's how you got your college paid for.
I did. I was lucky. So I ended up, I did enjoy athletics. I was pretty athletic as a kid and did really well in high school and got recognized by some college coaches, and that was my ticket in.
Okay. And then, it's funny because even though you went to college, what did you study?
Business,
nice and general.
Well, yeah. But so I was like, okay. Well, the choices back then were like, business, economics, which is a part of business, and nursing, accounting and things like that, all obviously part of the business school. And there's more than that. But at the time, this was in the, 80s, late 80s. It wasn't like this, like I just put my kids into college and there's like 100 things that you could do. Like it wasn't like that.
Yeah, but still the basics are probably the most valuable.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is that even though you went to college, your main education came when you were looking for a job and somebody offered for you to manage a small apartment building in Seattle and live there.
Well, there were a few things actually.
Okay.
Let me back up a little bit. So, wrestling paid for my tuition. And so, but I still had room and board and things like that, right? So you still have, it's not like I didn't have that. So I was still trying to figure that out. Like, where am I going to live? And that's going to cost some money. And by the way, my parents did help as well. So I want to point that out. They helped to the extent that they could, and they helped a lot. But I still had student loans. So I had student loans. My parents helped out, and I had the wrestling thing, and I worked. So I worked 3 jobs at once.
And wrestled.
Yes.
And went to school.
Yeah. But I had to, and because you have to, whatever, you just do whatever you have to do to make money to figure it out. And so I always had a good work ethic because my dad and mom were very, very hard workers. And my dad was always had, instilled that in all of us. And so that was never an issue for me. And so when I was working, I remember I was vacuuming the administration building at from like 5 to 7 when it would close, and all the buildings on campus. I would, basically like cleaning, and then I was campus safety, which was awesome because that started at night. So I would basically walk around with all the keys to the campus, which is probably crazy to think about now.
Little did they know.
Yeah, little did they know. And I would go around and check the doors and make sure nobody's breaking in. So we had that, and I worked at a drive-in theater. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget. It was called the 112th Street Theater on 112th Street, obviously in Tacoma, Washington. And I remember I watched Star Wars at least 100 times because twice a night for whatever it was. But and those were the 3 jobs that I had, and they all helped kind of move me through. So I was never afraid of that. But so when the idea of free rent came up.
And managing an apartment building.
I was like in.
But you also had no idea what you were doing.
No, I didn't. But I was,
It's okay though. That's how you learn.
I was
right?
paying rent. I was making money. I was doing what I had to do to figure stuff out. And so yes, I leaped at the job when I was offered the free rent job.
But I think that's something to really consider, because I think a lot of people get opportunities and they feel like they're not qualified for them, so they overthink it and just don't do it, especially when you're younger, you know what I mean? But, you just winged it. I think life, you just got to wing stuff, And
I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, think about it. Like, I'm sitting in there.
Well, how old were you? Probably 20.
Yeah, I was in my early 20s.
Yeah, 21, 22.
Yeah. And I remember my first job was to fire the assistant manager. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Right?
He's probably older than you.
Oh, for sure, right?
Yeah.
And so that was my first job, and there was an assistant manager. It was a 60-unit apartment building, and I was the manager, and there was an assistant. I don't know why there were 2, but there were, and so here I was making $600 a month plus a free 1-bedroom, and I thought, this is awesome, man. I can live on this. Imagine, I was living on, beer, like literally, and top ramen or whatever it was. And so, but that's really when I started to learn. I started to learn a lot from that building.
Well, yeah, you learned you had issues with rent collection, you had issues with maintenance, and you kind of were the maintenance person
I
too,
was.
right?
I didn't know any better. My dad was in construction, so I could fix anything. And he was in the Seabees in the Navy, so he could fix everything. And I grew up that way. We never had a handyman in our house, ever. I mean, he literally added on to the house. If he wanted an extra room or garage or whatever, he just built it. So that's just the way he was. That's how I grew up. So I could do all those things. And then, so I just stepped into that place. I'm like, well, we need to fix the toilets. We need to paint the units.
They got the cheapest labor
ever.
I
rented a carpet cleaner. I would go clean the carpets. I was basically doing everything, getting these units ready and renting them. And I actually was having a blast.
Well, that was your first leap. Everyone wants to know, how did you kind of get into real estate? And that was your first step into it.
And I learned a lot. We had people there. Obviously, I was one of the youngest, but we had people there that were divorced. They were single mothers. They were single fathers. They were, couples. And, it was a very interesting, very dynamic property, and it was 4 stories, 60 units, had a basement, and I tell you what, I look back on it, it was really, really, really fun. There was, when you don't have any money and you don't come from any money, I had an old VW, and that was my car, and I remember I was like, I need, I couldn't afford to park it in downtown Seattle, which is where I was, and at the time, and I remember it was $70 a month, and I was like, I had to negotiate with my landlord to help me pay for that, and all these little things that you do to make ends meet. It was so worth it.
So once you left there, once you graduated, you were offered a job in Vegas, managing other apartments with some of your friends down there.
Well, actually, what happened was, the first thing that happened was I got my real estate license in Washington State. And that was like, my mind was kind of blown, because all this, I had just gone through college, and I went through real estate school, and I was learning all these things. I was like, oh my gosh, like, there's a lot here. And then I got a job in Seattle for the company that I was managing the property for. They hired me to become a property manager of multiple properties. So then I was managing multiple properties of 4, 8, 12 units and
So
stuff
that,
like that.
yeah, so that was your first real property management.
Yeah, that was my off property.
Right.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
always managing property managers now.
Yeah.
So and that was really eye opening because I was driving up and down Interstate 5 all the way from, if anybody knows that area, up and down from Tacoma all the way up to Bellingham, just driving back and managing these small little properties for owners.
Right. And then so from there you went on and you thought, well, what the heck, I'm, doing all this. I should probably buy a condo for myself and start cash flowing that.
Yeah, that's what I did. I started saving some money at that point, and
Mm-hmm.
I ended up moving to Las Vegas and for the same company, and I started a division of their management company. So I went from on-site property manager to a regional property manager to a regional vice president, and this all happened in a period of 6 or 7 years, and I moved to Las Vegas, and that's when I started, I was still in my late 20s,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, I better start investing myself because I was managing all these properties for all these people.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a property manager, you collect the rent, you basically pay the expenses, and then you give them the balance after their mortgage. And so I was seeing how much money these folks were making. And,
Right.
and so I was like, I need to start doing the same thing. And by that time, after you manage property for that long, you kind of get a sense on tenants and pricing and how to run them and things to look for just from being in the business.
Yeah. And so then from there, you kind of started your own property management company.
I did.
So that was your first time really
Yeah.
being an entrepreneur.
Yep, first time. So I was a big leap because I was making good money. And I had grown through the business through that first company I'd done really well with. It was the exact same company that gave me the opportunity from the time I was finishing.
Graduated?
Yep,
Yeah.
from finishing school. And so I stayed with that company. That's the only job I ever had. Other than the stuff that I had in high school.
Yep.
And kind of the odd jobs that I had. But that was it. Call it a career, I guess. And then at the ripe age of, I think I was 28, 29, I started my own firm.
So that's interesting because, we have a lot of people watching that probably want to have their own business or have their own real estate. And, I'm noticing you're taking all of these risks, really, calculated risks, but, you're just going for it.
Yeah, I was. Well, it's actually, I think I realized that I was pretty managed, as you are, from with your time and how much you can make and all those kinds of things. By that time, I pretty much understood that there was going to be some caps on what I was going to do and what I was going to be, and there were other really good people in the firm and company that had more experience than me, and so those are all reasons that you can't move up, and so you start to look at all those things.
And you were pretty successful with your management company.
I was, yeah. So I started a company by myself, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I hired one woman, and she was my, receptionist, my bookkeeper, my accountant, my assistant, everything. And her name was Sandy, and she was the greatest. It was me and her, and I went out and started scrapping, and I was just trying to look for accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, you were the salesperson.
In the fee management business. My job was to go out and find fee management and bring it in, and I ended up doing that. I ended up finding multiple properties, and in a fairly quick period of time, within a year, I had multiple properties that I was managing personally, and had a little bit of income coming in. So it was very exciting.
Yeah, and I love this next part. So now you're all cocky, you've done well in the business. You bought your first condo that did well. You started your property management company and it did well. So then you decided, well, what the hell? I'll just start a carpet cleaning company because that's a great idea. So why don't you say what happened there?
So, all right. So, yeah, I ended up, this is where I started taking my eye off the ball. So, when you're running a property management company, you see all these things happening, like maintenance being done and painting, as an example. You're hiring guys to come in and do the painting. You're hiring people to come in and replace the flooring. You're hiring people to come in and clean the flooring. And I decided that, well, I've got all these properties now. Why not start a carpet cleaning company? So I literally went out and bought vans.
How much was that?
Don't ask. No.
I think you told me one time. It was a lot,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. I think I had 5 or 6 vans. And they were probably each 40 or 50 grand each, something like that. Bought the carpet cleaning machines, the vans, and all that stuff. And it was called Complete Carpet Works. And hired some guys to run it. And I literally thought it was going to be a lock and leave type thing. Like, oh, okay,
right,
got the vans,
carpets,
I got these guys.
Money,
I'm going to go over here and grow my property management company. Oh, man. I lost so much money from that. And we ended up, we weren't getting the business. The money wasn't coming in. And we had a lot of turnover because in that business you do. And it's hard work for very little margins. And I learned so much. And I ended up, closing it down. That was my, I remember sitting across from my dad one time. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I got to close down this business, this carpet cleaning business. And he's like, well, what happened? I go, I've been writing checks, and I think I'm up to around 250,000 negative now. And he's like, what? 'Cause that was like way more money than, that they had. And I lost quite a bit, and I ended up selling off the vans and getting what I could and closing her down.
I think it's interesting because I think a lot of the people watching and listening, their biggest fear when they're in their 20s and 30s to take these risks is the risk of failure, is that, right? But you learned from it, right?
It wasn't my first one. So, I had several.
Yeah.
Yes, I tried things. And the difference is now I think through things a little more before I do them. Now I learn things like margin. Now I learn things like staffing and management and, sales and systems and accounting and, customer service and all the things that you don't really know.
But it was still worth it to try,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
Because I think for people listening, they're afraid of that. And it's really not that bad to fail, right? You learn a lot.
Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah.
But it was so worth it now. I look back. I get people still, I have one shirt left. Actually, I this is a long time ago. I actually still have it in the closet. And I refuse to throw it away just because it's my reminder.
Right.
Of, of a big mistake. And, because we had shirts with the logos and vans with, all the stuff and, as you do. And it was a big mistake. But you're right. I learned a lot. I lost a lot. You don't really learn much when you're making money.
Right.
You learn a lot when you're losing money.
Exactly.
And you learn a lot. And that's when you really have to start to look at your own decisions, your own behavior, your own habits, your hiring, who you hire, how you bill, how you do your accounting, all your customer service, all that kind of stuff starts to make sense. So it was a really good pivotal point for me.
But then the people that are watching, they shouldn't really be afraid of that, right? Like that's just part of it. Like every entrepreneur is going to have failures. Like you can't really do it without them.
We still will. Yeah. It never stops, actually. I know guys that have been in business 20, 30 years are still having crash and burns all the time. I won't mention names, but I have a buddy of mine that's in his 50s, and he had 2 big companies going, and one we had to shut down.
Yeah.
So it happens.
Yeah.
And people lose money, and you lose money, and that's the other side that nobody ever really talks about very much, but it does happen. And
But that's the risk of, kind of trying these things. You can just work at a job and stay comfortable and not buy any real estate and not start a company and just do all that. And it's a lot less risk, but then there's just also less reward.
I actually think being in a company with nominal increases is more risk.
Yeah.
Now looking back.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was
When you're
there,
going through
when
it,
I was
right.
there going through it, even when I was going through it, I didn't have any regrets. But what I mean by that is when you're in a stable, secure position and you're getting a paycheck, then that's a lot of security.
Yeah.
To walk away from, and the unknown is big. But when you look back, you're and you actually make it, or you think you make it, you're grateful.
Yeah.
You're grateful for taking that leap.
Yeah. And then, so let's fast forward a bit. So you met Ross, who is your now partner at MC Companies.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet, and what made you want to partner? Why were you looking for a partner, or what happened?
So again, like if you're not moving, you're not growing, and so my company at the time, the first one that I started, was growing. And Ross, I had met through an organization that we both belonged on, which was a multi-housing association that we both were on the board. And I was on that because I was trying to stay ahead of all the things that are going on in the multi-housing business and keep my network and all the kinds of things. So we were both involved. And I really respected him a lot. He was one of the chairmen, past chairman, and I was on the board. And he owned a property management company and a development company in Tucson, and mine was in the Phoenix area. And I wanted to expand statewide. That was my first goal, was I wanted to be a statewide management company. And so I called him up because I knew him, and I said, hey, I was actually looking at buying a company down there in Tucson. And he said, well, maybe we should meet for coffee. And so we met, and he, Ross had a lot more experience than I did. He had built properties, and he was a contractor. So he was a general contractor, which meant that he actually had experience building apartments. Mm-hmm. And so that was a division that I wanted, was not just the property management, but also to be able to have the construction piece. He wanted me for the ops, mm-hmm. to be able to run the ops, and I wanted him for the construction. And then the goal was always to buy properties together.
Right. And what I like about that story is, for the people watching, is you are who you hang out with. So you are on the board of a multifamily group. Ross is too. That's how you connected. You weren't at home every night playing video games. You would never have connected with Ross or anything like that, because you are who you hang out with, and the opportunities will come to you through who you surround yourself with.
That's right. So like this weekend, I'm always trying to develop, personally, whatever it might be. And I think that, whether it's connecting with people on Zoom or going to something, a conference, or, I'm always connected to my industry. Mm-hmm. I'm always meeting with people in my industry. You never know who you're going to meet, what you're going to learn, who you're going to listen to. And I think that I've always done that, and that's how I met Ross. That's how I met most of my people in my network, and right. It had a massive impact on everything I've ever done. Because when you expand your network, then you can pretty much reach into your pocket for anything that you need. Mm-hmm. And so when I was ready to buy properties, I was already in the network. I just didn't know how to do it.
Exactly. And then you're also around when other people have opportunities that may need you as well.
That's exactly what would happen, right? There's a lot of reciprocity there. And so, as we were managing, obviously you have to be good at what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then you start to attract business. And so that was all positive, and that's why Ross wanted to partner as well. is because I had a lot of pride in my firm and in my company and what we were doing, and I spent a lot of time nurturing those relationships with those owners and the banks and stuff like that. And then when I got finally to the position to be able to do it myself with Ross on a big level, then I knew that we would be able to pull it off, even though I didn't know how.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us to the last point, which everyone always asks, how do I raise money for an investment? How do I raise money for an investment? So how did you raise money for your first investment?
So, first of all, what I thought I needed was a bunch of money, which gave me the false courage of going out and buying something. I really thought that I needed money in the bank or somebody to say, "Yeah, I'll buy whatever you decide." Which
you got my buy-in.
Yeah, which does not happen.
Right. I have $100,000.
Yeah, and so it just doesn't happen that way. What I found is that a lot of people say, yeah, we'll fund you, but then they don't, and they don't even have the money.
Yeah.
I mean, even we just went through an equity raise recently, and I don't know how many people dropped out, but everybody said, yeah, we're in. At the end of the day, man, like, show me your money. It doesn't always happen.
Yeah, and
so
that's why we always overraise.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think to answer your question, what happens is the property, the deal is what attracts the money.
Right.
So so that was a big aha moment for me. And so what happened was I ended up owning one of the properties I managed was a property that was owned by a group out in New York, and it's a long story, but the grandson basically had been put into Arizona to build this property for this very wealthy family in New York, and the grandfather's on the Forbes list. I mean, they own a lot of property in Manhattan, and so I was managing the property, and so the grandson got bored. He's a trust kid. And basically, the grandfathers, and I made a deal for me to be able to buy the property. That's the first property that Ross and I bought. It was one that I was managing. And so, but we needed $2 million, and we didn't have it. So that's what we needed as a down payment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my first big. Now, I'd done small stuff. I'm talking about houses and condos and stuff like that with partnerships and little, but this was big. So what we did is we put together a business plan, and we showed them the return on the property. So, and we didn't have a network of investors.
Right.
So, but you don't when you start.
But you were hanging out with the right people
the
right groups.
Yes, right. So because I was already in the network in the multi-housing space. So now I had an agreement with the owner or the seller. It was not listed. And he ended up cutting a deal with me because I had a great relationship with him from the management side.
Right.
And he had a lot of faith in me at the time, and I'll never forget. I was walking through the Portland airport, and he called me, and and we cut a deal right then. It was a handshake deal, basically. I mean, we had to paper it up later, but never had to worry about it. I just had to find the $2 million, which we put together in a business plan. And if the business plan shows how the return is made, like people look at, if I'm going to get $2 million from you, and it's secured by a property, and it produces, let's say, 10% cash on cash, or let's say $200,000 a year, you're probably going to do a deal like that.
Right.
Right. And so the deal produced the deal was the property was the deal.
Right. But you always have to remember, right, so you are selling the deal, not just getting investors before you go find a deal, because to your point, people bow out. It's hard to guarantee somebody money when you don't even know what they're going to do with it. But you also had those connections. So you weren't just door knocking, trying to find money. I mean, you have to put yourself, the 20s and 30-some, 40-some year olds listening, you have to put yourself around people that are doing big things in order or involved in the industry in some way in order to be able to raise money when you do find a deal.
Right. That's the thing. And so now that's what we've done now is we build more of a network. It's a lot easier now because you have the internet, you have LinkedIn, you have all these things where you can put your stuff out there. People know who you are. You can create your own brand. But back then it was very different. It was, trying to find, hey, do you know anybody that might want to invest in my deal?
But the fundamentals I still think are the same, because even if you bing somebody on LinkedIn and they don't know you, the chances of them investing with you are almost zero.
Well, the point is it's easier now.
Yeah, it is easier.
It's a lot easier.
But it's still a lot of effort, because I just think some people watching, they're just trying to figure out like how you got started and how they can, be in your shoes. And I think one of the bigger things is putting yourself around people that are doing things.
It is. And then also finding deals. Now we get deals thrown at us. I mean, I probably get 1 or 2 a day. So now, now that's reversed. I'm not out trying to find deals as much. So we're attracting them because we're performing on them. And also our investors, as you know, we just oversubscribed on a $23 million raise of equity on an $80 million purchase. And we had more money than we need. Well, that's 20 years of buying properties, giving people checks, managing them, phone calls, conversations, investor summits, employee summits, building employee culture and all those kinds of things.
But it all started with managing a small apartment building in Seattle,
right?
Tacoma.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, we're going to wrap it up now, but we're going to see you guys next Monday.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the convo.